Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Happy Monday, Dr. Paul. How are you?
I am doing fine and ready and raring to go.
That's
to
right.
stop another war.
Let's do our best.
Of course, things haven't been too bad. At least the number of people being killed are a lot less than it's been in the past. But it doesn't mean we don't have some time bombs out there, that we have to warn people about, because sometimes it gets out of hand. But, in thinking about that, I don't anticipate, and I don't think a lot of other people anticipate, that the next big war is going to be World War I or World War II, or even Vietnam. I think it's more likely to be very, very advanced technology that's being used, drones and whatever. And I think this is part of the question that we have now, because the big argument is still over what happened a week ago when the oil facility in Saudi Arabia got bombed or hit, or we're not sure whether it's cruise or missiles or sabotage, because we just don't know the answer yet. But it's still in big discussion. So it's a political discussion. How does everybody look good? How do you appease the people who don't like wars? Yeah. I think our president really probably doesn't like war. He doesn't want to start one. At the same time, he can't look weak, so you have to do something. And now that's back and forth now. And it looks like doing something for the administration, sending troops to Saudi Arabia, I think has some risk to it, because as we should all recall, that one of the excuses for the Al-Qaeda hitting us on 9/11, troops on the Holy Land of Saudi Arabia, the peninsula of Saudi Arabia. So just to say we'll put troops on there and satisfy MBS that he wants there, and he wants support for the world for all this. We have to come to his rescue because they've been hit.
Yeah.
But I think sorting out the truth is something that we're going to keep working at. I think we have a pretty good idea what isn't true. One thing isn't true in my estimation, and part of the problem is that if you look at our media, Republican or Democrat or whatever, it's 100% nearly of Iran's fault. And they're no angels, but I tell you what, it takes a Saudi Arabia to have a conflict like that over there. It doesn't just, it's amazing how definitely, Pompeo knows exactly.
Immediately.
They set that up, and yet, did they ask a question? Well, when did Iran really participate in a terrorist attack like the Saudis did?
Yeah.
It's nowhere close. So sorting out the truth, I think, would be one thing that is important. And you know what? If the American people knew the truth, and when they do know about it, they sort of agree with us. What are we doing there? Why do we get involved? Why are we in Afghanistan for 18 years, spending trillions of dollars, and literally we're broke? So I think we have logic and morality on our side that we shouldn't be fighting that war over there. And I think putting troops and military personnel in Saudi Arabia is escalation. I think it's more than Trump realizes, because he doesn't want any killing, but sanctions and all this type of activity end up starving people, and people do die.
Yeah, and he's, as you wrote this morning, he's been cornered in by everyone saying, hey, it's Iran, it's Iran. How are you going to respond to Iran without anything coming out? The Saudis, we've been hit. And the rest of the world goes, yeah, right. Because they know that they've been hitting Yemen for 4 years. They've destroyed the country. It's a war of aggression. And then when Yemen fights back, when the Houthis fight back, they're playing the victim, which is absurd. But what I think is fascinating about this whole strike, about what happened a week ago, and I really do, Dr. Paul, I think history is going to record this as one of those times, one of those points where everything shifts, everything changes. You think about it, the U.S. global power rests on this idea that we have massive air power. We can put on any situation. We have the biggest planes, the most sophisticated planes, the most expensive planes. We dominate the world. And then all of a sudden, everything shifts. There's a new generation of cheap drones, cheap cruise missiles, cheap precision strike ballistic missiles, and they're basically rendering our massive, extraordinarily expensive and sophisticated military irrelevant. Because if you think about it, we had that particular area where that attack took place is covered in surveillance, radar, other surveillance. The U.S. Fifth Fleet is about 100 miles away. There's somehow could not have gone unnoticed unless all of our stuff doesn't work.
You know, this sent out some good news to the military-industrial complex, because immediately it said, now, we have to send them a defense system over there. Like they don't have it already. Good, we'll send it over there. But the particular one that they want to send, there's pretty good evidence it doesn't even work. And I thought, well, it probably doesn't matter. It spend money, and if it doesn't work, that doesn't matter. It helps the military-industrial complex. But, you know, we send the airplanes. A lot of the airplanes don't even work. That's the only thing going for us, their ineptness. And they have to be cautious. But that doesn't mean that we should be complacent. There's too much weaponry around. Even though it's changing maybe more to drone warfare, and where there be less troops marching in and massive thousands of people landing on beachheads. That's not going to happen. But the downside of that is if a war breaks out and it's so fast, and they do have the ability to lob missiles all over the place, you could conceive of a 24, 48 hours of doing a lot of destruction. And that, of course, is the reason that we would like to see people talking. Now, under these conditions, it's all, you know, sort of political posturing. But the Houthis has admitted, why don't we have a ceasefire and talk about a truce?
Yeah.
And maybe they would be willing if it were honest, because there are victims. And so when they make this offer, and do you know what happened? Not long after that, 27 Saudi airstrikes, you know, on the Houthis. And that's where the real misinformation is, that Iran is 99% guilty of all this, and yet the evidence, nobody denies it. Nobody says that we're not involved. Everybody knows we're involved. And this is the propaganda machine that works very well, and we can't even get one TV station that might have a little disagreement on this. Of course, it's sort of a little bit sad that a more objective view comes out of RT, you know, and people, oh, that's RT, you can't listen to them. Well, what if they happen to be more truthful than what you hear from CNBC or CNN? So that's the problem, is sorting out the truth. But I am convinced when the people hear it, they're going to respond and come in our direction.
And, you know, Iran may have sold or transferred these weapons to Yemen for the Yemenis to use. The Houthis have recently demonstrated increased ability in drones. They may have sent them over, but, you know, the neocons would say, well, that still makes them guilty. They supplied the weapons. Well, what does that say about every single Saudi bomb that's ever dropped on a Houthi wedding ceremony, funeral, kids, marketplaces, every single bomb? So if you want to go down that route, then there's going to be a lot of blame to go around for doing this. And let's not forget, as you point out, who started the whole thing. But I think what's happening, you know, the Saudis did this bombing. They're not apparently not crazy about this Houthi offer of ceasefire. The UN is pushing the Saudis to accept a ceasefire. The Japanese are not buying the idea that Iran is behind it. This global coalition that the U.S. is calling for is not coming together. And the Saudis are realizing this is no longer a cost-free exercise. Their oil supply, their oil facilities are vulnerable now, but even more so, their water desalination plants are vulnerable. With that, if you knock out their ability to get salt out of that water, there's going to be a lot of thirsty Saudis running around. They're going to be pretty ticked off. So,
and you know, the ultimate goal is that the Iranians can't export 1 gallon.
Yeah.
And if that isn't pretty vicious and very violent, because people die over that. But you know, the foreign minister Zarif had a comment. And they were saying, if we deploy our troops there, that is escalation. They have to talk tough. We don't know whether they would or not, but it shouldn't be totally ignored, because you're making the point, how far can they be pushed till something like that happen? But it didn't take long for our Secretary of State to respond because he is a master at morality, and he was able to point out that it's all Iranians' fault. And even though he brags about, I hate to mention this because it's really sick, he brags that he was part of the CIA. He was trained there. You think we don't lie?
Yeah.
That's pretty bad. But his whole point of the announcement was that people should come together.
Yeah.
That we have a moral responsibility to confront the Iranians, and he wants to grab the moral high ground. If he gets it, I'll tell you what, we're sick for accepting that, and it's just a shame because I think the American people and the political support for Bolton, he finally ended, and that was good news. But there's still too many other neocons in the administration.
There are three interesting things that I just want to touch on quickly. First of all, in an article I read pointed this out. Well, as you just said, Pompeo was out there in front. Iran did it. There has been no Pentagon report accusing Iran of doing it. That says a lot, I think. There's something very interesting there. The other thing is this neocon lie that this whole thing happened because Trump didn't hit Iran after they took out that drone. And Pat Lang talks about it, this neocon idea, if you hit Iran, they will behave. That's the premise upon which all of this neocon rests. That is a pretty doggone dangerous premise to have because they've shown that they're not going to back down, and they've said they're not going to back down. They're referred to as a drone superpower in the region. So is it really worth risking? And the final other thing that I would just point out, because a lot of people say, oh yeah, even some people that are nominally on our side, yeah, but we have to defend global oil. We have to defend the global strategic oil. But here's something that they don't realize how much has shifted recently. The U.S. has become the #1 oil exporter in the world. Saudi Arabia is not our supplier, they're our competitor. And so that shifts the entire rationale for our defending Saudi oil completely on its head, completely as a 180.
You mentioned about keep hitting them and we'll discipline them and they'll come our way. Well, we keep hitting them with sanctions and all this. And if there is any dissent within a country like Iran, it sort of weakens them because they have to join in when the country is under attack. And that was the philosophy in the 60s. Keep hitting Vietnam. The more we hit them, they'll capitulate and they'll have to come over.
Guess
what? The more we hit them, the more people we killed, the more they hated us, and the more determined they were, and the more they saw themselves on the moral high ground, just defending their homeland. And that is what the case is. So it doesn't work. It really does exactly the opposite when you say we'll have to keep hitting them. But it is more complex like that, and you bring up the subject of oil, and oil may be, always one of the biggest issues. But it's just, I think it's the psychological high that most Americans, too many Americans, get out of having an empire.
Yeah.
They don't want to give up power, and that to me is a shame.
Yeah, it is. Well, I would just close with a couple of things. First of all, one final comment. The Treasury Secretary Mnuchin really demonstrates why U.S. foreign policy is a total failure. Here's in a nutshell what he says. Well, just because it's failing doesn't mean it's failing, it means it's succeeding. And here's the quote. Well, tensions are worse with Iran because it's working. We've cut off all the money to Iran. You see Iran in desperation attacking its neighbors, as if all of a sudden, because Trump was so tough, they woke up and decided to attack their neighbors. So there you have it. Even if it doesn't work, that means it's working. Crazy. I will close with two things. First of all, here's a way you can help the Liberty Report, and you won't even barely have to move your hand or your finger. And that is just to go down here and click like, because that will trigger the algorithms to push this show up higher in people's recommended shows. A lot of people will see it that might not normally see it. Just hitting a like won't cost you a penny. It'll cost you a quarter of a second. If we get a couple of 3,000 likes on this, it's going to be broadcast everywhere. So that's an easy one, and we appreciate that. The second one, you may notice that we're back to having a two-shot with our camera. We had a camera go out a couple of weeks ago. These things aren't cheap, guys. They're very expensive. It's hard to run this studio. We had to dig under our couch and dig out a couple of quarters. we're able to afford a new camera, so we have a nice new 2-shot. If you want to help support the show, you can make a tax-deductible donation to the Ron Paul Institute. Just go to ronpaulinstitute.org, and you can click support and help us not have to dig too deep under our car seats to dig pennies out for the cameras. Dr. Paul?
Very good. And you alluded to this, and that has to do with the bombing. And when we lose, we literally lose. We lost the war in Vietnam, and we didn't win a war in Korea. And I don't think we're doing so hot in Afghanistan right now. But the neocons, you got to give them credit. They never give up. And they turn it around and they say, yes, it's because you scoundrels don't care about America. You don't care about our empire. You don't care about our Constitution. You don't care about the military. So the worse they are, the bigger the excuse is, and put the blame onto those who don't want to go to war. I think that is so tragic because they've turned it on a head, and yet it's every night on TV. I can understand why people finally give up on it. I have to watch it a little bit because I want to know what the enemy's saying. And unfortunately, we don't have too much support out there to explain, the actual facts of it. And it's constant. And it's frustrating for me and our program at times when we see maybe a movement in the right direction with either administration or just anybody, but it doesn't fit a principle. It's sort of a political strategy, technical move, which is temporary. They don't ever ask the question, well, what is our moral responsibility in the world? Is it to police the world and kill people when they don't obey what we tell them? Or is our responsibility maybe trying to get along with people? Maybe the whole idea of free trade might be anti-war. I wonder if anybody ever thought of that. Free trade is actually anti-war. The founders talked about it. The more you trade with people, the less likely you are to fight with them. So yes, we won't trade with Iran. It's more likely we're going to fight with them. And Iran's not going to attack us, and they never have. And yet they say that they're still the enemy that we have to defeat. So the policy of non-intervention is very clear, it's easy to understand, and there's no doubt in my mind that it is the policy of peace and prosperity. And that is why we will continue to promote that in the RPI, the Institute for Peace and Prosperity, because I do actually believe sincerely that most people of the world, except for the psychopath, really want peace and prosperity, and we'll keep working for it. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.